This is Sarah Leslie with Go All In, helping entrepreneurs live the life they want to live right now, making the money that they want to make the way they want to make it, while also living a rich, full life outside of their business where they feel so comfortable in their own skin. True personal freedom. Let's go. Hi, everybody. So glad to be here, and I'm so glad that you're here too. So, a few weeks back, I hosted an additional masterclass. Normally, I do masterclasses once a month, usually the third week of the month. Different days, I fluctuate between Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And this was an additional masterclass that I was hosting where I was specifically targeting coaches that maybe were newer in the business of coaching or newer to owning their own business, or also just coaches who've hit a spot in the business where they aren't making the money that they're used to making or the money that they really want to be making, and they want to reignite that flow or relearn some of the basics, or they just want making money to feel more easeful. And that's what I'm all about, is living life in the rest, right? So finding the more easeful path. You may have heard a more famous way of saying that, which is taking the road less traveled from the rest of the crowd, who in general is still working very hard to achieve the things that they want. And I did that for many years, all of my adulthood up until about 38. So it's been a journey for me to learn the more easeful way, and I'm still in that journey myself, right? You don't work really hard and go through life doing really hard for over 20 years and then just flip a switch. That's for sure. And it's taken a lot less time than I thought it would to actually understand the rest in a way that has allowed me to actually live in it, right? I was reminded this week working with clients, there's such a radical difference between understanding something intellectually, right? We can understand a concept intellectually. And until we're actually watching ourselves do the behavior or live out the concept, we don't actually understand it even as much as maybe we think we do. Because again, right, when we really understand a concept, we just do it. That's how it works. So all of that said, loved this little masterclass that I had. I say little because it was a smaller, intimate group than what I normally host for my monthly masterclass, and it was absolutely delicious. The folks that attended were super eager, really interested, and really soaking it in, right? You can see when you're watching people's faces how they just light up and they're like taking notes and they're really into it. I'm excited to be here with you today to be able to relay that information. I don't record my masterclasses. This is the way that I sort of quote record or put that information out there. So I know the people that were there will be looking forward to receiving the notification that this podcast has dropped. We're going to talk today about creating consistent cash flow in your business. That's the topic. And we're going to look at what that means. One, why it's so hard, or at least at certain parts of your journey, why it's hard to do it. And I'm going to just clarify, it's not always only hard in the beginning. For some people in the beginning, it's actually not hard, right? And also, you could be 10 years down into business and it could start to feel hard. So this is at every stage in business where it has the potential to feel hard. What keeps it from happening, right? What causes it to feel hard? What stops it from happening? And also the top 3 things to focus on in order to be able to create that consistent cash flow and or reignite that consistent cash flow. So I want to invite you, as always, to set an intention for what it is you really want from this podcast, right? From our 30 to 40 minutes together, what is it that you really want? Why are you really here? So if you're watching the podcast just as a normal part of your routine, right? It drops once a week and you just watch it. Cool. Thank you. It's awesome. I love that you're here. And also consider, why are you listening to this specific one, right? Think about the topic and then say for yourself, I want this from this, listening to this podcast, okay? Setting an intention is the easiest way. Sorry, I literally just drank some tea right before I got on here and I'm like, still digesting it apparently. So setting an intention is one of the fastest ways to actually getting what you want. And it's one of those early on steps of getting what you want is just setting the intention, right? Making the declaration, making a claim that says, I want this thing. You could also think about it like you're requesting, right? So step one. All right. Here's how I want to position us, right? Give us some context for this conversation. You are designed for success. Okay? Really let that sink in. And so maybe say to yourself, and hear me as I say it and repeat it with me, I am designed for success. It just feels so delicious, right? Like to really think about how you as a human, as the you that you are, right? And me as Sarah, I am designed for success. Literally. So cool to really resonate in that. Just really ooh, marinate. I was designed to advance, to progress, to move forward, to take in information and to marinate on it and to see new insights and new awarenesses and then be able to grow and shift the way that I have been being into a new way of being, right? Even if we're just shifting that small 1%, it's amazing because that adds up and compounds to where you have the potential to be so radically improved. And when I say improved, I mean more delicious and more confident and more restful and more comfortable in your own skin. So I want you to really just have that as the context for what we're even talking about, right? And your mind might be like, what does this have to do with consistent cash flow? It has everything to do with consistent cash flow, which is why I'm setting it up this way. Okay. And you maybe have not heard this before. So let it be something new and so super fun, as just a completely new way of thinking about it. So if you are wired, designed, articulated, constructed for success, for advancement, for growth, for you becoming the most comfortable in your own skin and the most confident to do the very things that light you up and inspire you, okay? Then of course you're meant to have consistent cash flow. Yes. So if you're having any doubt right now with where you're at in your journey, right, it's very normal to have doubt on the entrepreneur journey and just in the human experience. It's very normal to have self-doubt and have self-doubt around this area of success and whether or not you can actually be what it is your heart desires. And I want you to know, yes, absolutely, it's possible for you. And not only is it possible, but it's what you are meant for. It's what you were designed for. Okay? Now, many people will choose to stay stuck where they're at and never get to experience all of the goodness that is available for them and be able to experience feeling really comfortable and confident in their own body because they choose not to go down this path of self-discovery and greater self-awareness and stripping away of the things that have gotten indoctrinated into you, ingrained in you, conditioned in you, that aren't necessary to be there and aren't useful. So, the biggest lie, the greatest lie I believe that humans can tell themselves is this very simple. I'm just going to whittle it down to I can't have what I desire. And that can sound like a lot of different things, right? It's too late. I'm too old. It's too big. It costs too much, right? We come up with so many different ways to basically say the same thing, which is I can't have what I really, really want. I can't have what I feel like I'm literally meant to have here. What my purpose is, what my journey is, what my, heart's desire is. Pick your word choice. Okay. So that's not your path. That's not for you. You want the thing and you can have the thing, and that's why you're here, because you wanna go all in on your life and your business, and ultimately that means having what your heart craves. So why is it so hard, right? If it's so hard, if it's what you're designed for and you're meant to have it, then why is it so hard to create the things that we desire, like consistent cash flow in our business? Now, I've asked myself this 1,000 times, right? Why is it so hard? Now, to be accurate, I don't ask myself that nearly as often. Like, I guess I would say I ask myself that rarely in the last few years compared to in the first 20 years. I did ask myself that sometimes multiple times a day. Why is it so hard? Why is life so hard? Why is my job so hard? Why does it feel so hard to make money? We can explain why it's so hard to make consistent cash flow, to have so much goodness, to enjoy our life. And ultimately, all of that boils down to why it's so hard to feel good about who you are and what you're doing here on the planet, right? That's really what we're all after, is to feel comfortable in our own skin and to feel good about who we are. And as a therapist, there were 1,000 different ways that I could explain to somebody why it was so hard. And there were 1,000 different ways that I could help somebody to work through the thing that they were working on, and or the thing that was coming up for them that felt so hard. And the reality is we can actually simplify it radically. Somebody was asking me yesterday, what modality I use now in coaching and when I'm coaching people today. And the reality is, I'm saying reality a lot, huh? I keep it really dialed in, really simplified, and I've taken out a lot of the things that of course, at the time when I was providing therapy, I didn't know I was making it more complicated than it actually is and or needs to be. And I have been able to simplify it because I've been studying the heck out of these things, right? I studied psychotherapy for 20 years, and I was an obsessive learner. I loved reading. I loved going to all the trainings. I loved all the learnings. And then same now, right? I'm an obsessive learner, but from a different energy of cool, I get to learn more versus I have to understand better. So all of that to bring us back to very simplified. The reason it's so hard is because you've learned for things to be hard. And at the end of the day, right, when we're not comfortable with ourselves, then everything else just does feel hard in our lives. Think about it, right? If you're really at odds with yourself, and you probably don't realize you're at odds with yourself. Goodness knows, I was a psychotherapist and I didn't realize I was at odds with myself until, many, many, many years into therapy. Okay. Many, many years into my role as a therapist. If you're not feeling good about your life, chances are very high, in the 90%, that you're not feeling good about who you are. If we were just going to strip it down and allow it to sound in such a way that was so simple and easy, that's it. It's just that. It's huge. There's no that's all it is, because it's can be really, really hard to get yourself out of that space. It was for me. And it is actually just that simple. Again, right? I talk about this a lot in a lot of my videos, and because I just feel so passionate about it. And I used to work with folks who were really having very hard days, and we would have referred to them as clients struggling with mental health. And what I came to learn from so many conversations with them is, wow, this person just has a lot of the same stuff that I have, which is ultimately whittling it down into something very simple. They don't like parts of who they are, and they just didn't like those parts about themselves way more than where I was at. And it led them into this totally altered state of reality. So I won't get into my rant around that for now in this episode. So let's keep going, right? So consistent cash flow. I think the other thing I'll just address here with why it's so hard is even just the notion of consistent cash flow, right? We've just like come up with that. It's really just a belief. It's really just a thing that we've been conditioned to believe is something that you should have or something that you need to have. This is, again, something I've had come up with multiple people over the last week or so, where they're like really stressing over wanting this consistent cash flow. And they're like so like worried about the cash flow and et cetera. Right? We get trained from early on, like all through school. It's very predictable. And you like have certain things that are predictable. And when you get a pop quiz, it's not predictable and it like freaks you out. Okay. And also you then end up in, your job. And again, you just taught and trained and conditioned, just like you are working out, like conditioning your body, you're conditioning your mind to believe, oh, I should get paid every 2 weeks, or I should get paid every Friday, or whatever it is, right? For me, it was always every 2 weeks. It's also totally fine to not have consistent cash flow, right? When you're living in a different way, when you're living in the rest, you're living in the highest level of faith. You're like in faith that the cash is coming when you need it. Now, don't get freaked out. You can have consistent cash flow. And I just want you to see what's like way on the other side when we're not living in this fearful, ego-driven, fearful kind of place, conditioned place. There's another place over here, which is also amazing and really delicious. So part of what's even hard, or why it feels hard, is because you're working off of a belief, a program that was instilled in you at a very, very early age. And so it's an unconscious belief system that you're believing has to be the way that it is. And if it isn't that way, something is wrong. Okay. Again, that's just a program that you were conditioned to believe. So that being said, the other thing I want you to see here, right, is that if you're not creating the money you want to be creating, then what's actually happening here is something is missing in your understanding of how to create what you want. Because money is just a thing that you're creating because you want it, right? Because you have some like desired thing that you need the money for. So a simple way of understanding this for myself that I came to, again, really whittling it down and like clearing out a lot of the extra ways of describing this, is I was lacking depth of understanding. So again, I was hugely successful. I was a very good therapist. I got lots of great feedback from clients. I was promoted, all of the things. And I was also very stuck in my own limitations. I was very stuck in my own programs. I was very stuck in my own ways that I thought life had to be. And so when life doesn't go the way we think it has to go, oftentimes we freak out. If I just put it really clearly, right? We freak out. And so again, right, we think we have to have consistent cash flow in order to like feel good. It's not really true. It's just not really true. So if you're not creating the money you want to create, then yes, you have a problem. And really what needs to shift is learning how to create what you want. I had a client of mine this week say, it had to get really, really hard for me to actually be able to shift in this place. And I was like, no, dude, actually, that's just a program. That's just a conditioned belief set that you think things have to get really bad or things have to hit rock bottom in order for you to change directions. And actually, all that ever needs to happen to change directions is you just need to decide to change directions. Okay? It's such a beautiful game changer to recognize the belief sets that govern our lives, the unconscious belief sets that are governing how we show up in the world. And majority of the time, right? I'm not going to say all the time, but the majority of the time, It's only a belief set, which means you can simply decide to do it differently. You can just decide to do it differently. But again, because you've been so conditioned to believe, oh, it has to get really bad for me to learn, or it has to get really bad for me to, do it differently, then you wait for that to happen, which again is one of the ways that we make things really hard for ourselves is we unconsciously sabotage ourselves and we do various things to allow our lives to get really, really hard because we've been trained and conditioned to believe that when things get really, really hard, then I get really, really motivated for things to change and I do them differently. So you could also just decide to hear what I'm saying, like really hear what I'm saying, go do it, and do it now by just changing the way that you're showing up in your life. You're wanting to create more money? Cool. Do the things that I'm teaching you here so that you can actually start to create more money and not let things get worse for yourself. Okay, moving forward. So there's a handful of things that I want to share here, and I'm actually like thinking inside of my head whether I want to keep going or I want to put this into a second podcast, which I might just do here. And I'm going to end up just telling you a little bit more around the information of how to actually make a shift, right? So you want to be creating consistent cash flow. So from all of my experiences, right, working with top level mentors in the past 5+ years, I've narrowed it down to just a few things. There are an abundant number of things that, I could talk about. And there are some very key things, like I just shared with you. You just make a new decision. You tell yourself a different story and you start living into that story. Again, it's so hard to do that because you've been trained and conditioned to believe that your current story, your current way of seeing things is a fact, is the truth. Okay. So if you believe that you, for instance, have to hit rock bottom in order to change in a certain area of your life, then you will really resist hearing me say, no, you don't have to do that. You just need to hear what I'm saying and let's go in this direction instead. When you hear me say that, there's a part of you that's like, she's lying, right? Now it's an unconscious part of you. It's not a conscious part of you. It's an unconscious part of you. And so you won't be able to have that conversation, right? Where you'll say, oh no, I don't believe you. It will feel more like, I don't believe her. But inside of your mind, you'll be thinking something like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, of course, if I don't like the road I'm going down right now, then I should just be able to change directions and go down this road instead, right? So take for instance, relationships. They're such a hot topic and there's so many emotions that come up inside of relationships. It makes them really easy examples to use, right? If you're in a relationship and you're like, oh, this relationship feels like it has so many good feelings, but it also has a lot of not so good feelings. And I can just really tell inside of me, this relationship is really not good for me. Okay. I've been in that situation several times over the years. So if you can relate, you probably can. I'm making it super simple and relatable. If you are in that situation and you're like, oh, I really got to break up with this person, but I really don't want to, right? There's an inner knowing, right? An inner wisdom inside of you that says this person is not in my best interest, at least at this time in my journey. And I really do need to let them go. I should let them go. But then there's this other part of you that's like, but I don't want to, right? And so you keep at that tension. This is what makes it so hard, right? If things were easy, if doing this work were easy, you would just break up with them because your inner wisdom is saying to break up with them. But there's all of this other conditioned programming, right? And conditioned feelings and conditioned thoughts about oh, I'm going to be alone, or I might never find anybody else, or, but they're a really good person and I like them, that keeps you in the relationship. This is what is actually hard about creating anything that we want, whether it's money, it's relationships, anything that we want. This is what makes it hard this internal conflict that comes from the inner wisdom that gets pitted against your conditioned programs, your conditioned belief sets. Okay? That's why you feel that radical tension and you go back and forth and back and forth. One of the ways that I explain this to my clients is you're in faith and then you're out of faith. You're in faith and then you're out of faith. I had somebody, I was hosting a breakout room this past week, and she was like, I'm all in. Like, she's like, I'm so in. I love, my business. I love what I'm doing, da, 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 da. But then like, also like, I got to be real and I got to like think about what I need to do to actually make money. Which I loved that example. I was like, this is such a beautiful example for what makes making money hard, is what that actually is. I was able to coach her, like, what's really being revealed here is you're sometimes in faith in your business and that you can create money. And then you just fall out of faith sometimes, which is the other part of the brain, right? The conditioned part of the brain that says, yeah, but like also you got to make money. You got to like be responsible. All those conditioned beliefs, again, get pitted against the inner wisdom, the faith side of us, the trust side of us, right? So that's actually what makes making money hard, is we go back and forth between these two parts of us, that part that lights us up and we're excited about our business and we're like excited about talking to people about our business. We're excited about making offers to people. And then that other part of us that's like, I'm terrified at talking to people. I'm terrified at putting my offers out there and sharing what I do in the world. So that's what's happening. And that to me is like the most important part to really understand, because when you actually understand, right, you hear me talking about it and then you're like, oh my gosh, that is totally what happens to me. That's like exactly what is going on with me when I think about wanting to make more money, or when I think about wanting to create more clients, or when I think about wanting to change my business and scale back so that I actually have more time doing things with my family, or taking trips, or, writing that book that you really want to write. And yet you don't allow yourself to do that because you're worried about not making enough money, or you're worried about what will happen with your cash flow if you shift and you do that. This is why that feels so push-pull, okay? Literally the most important part to first really understand. And I wanted to extend talking about that because when you don't really understand that push-pull, you'll just be like, oh yeah, I get that. And then you move on. And then you want to like get into the doing of the things that need to happen that are different. But really, you have to really understand this, where you're like, oh, I get it now, which is what I call having the breakthrough, having that deep level of awareness, right? The breakthrough. Okay, so stay tuned for part 2 of this podcast, which I'm just going to flip into the next podcast here, where I'm going to break down the top 3 things to focus on to create consistent cash, right? And I'm just going to tell you in real time, I literally made this decision as I was doing the podcast, and I was having the inner conflict around, oh, but this isn't the right way to do the podcast, or, oh, I already plan to like do all of the content, so I don't want to divert from the original plan. Again, that's all my conditioned beliefs that say I want to do it the right way. I want to like make sure I'm getting all of this done the best way, right? Or I'm following my teachers or my podcast coach, for instance, right? Versus just allowing my inner wisdom to be like, whoa, dude, you need to slow down and talk about this exact topic more so that people can really get it and save this other really juicy information for the next podcast. So I was literally experiencing internal conflict right here as I was sharing with you. That's how often this is happening inside of you. That's how real this is. It affects everything that you're doing. And even more inside of things that feel hard or are new or are territory where your skill set is not refined. So, okay. So stay tuned for part 2 of this one. And I have some like super exciting, juicy news to share with you. I'm realizing when I go high pitched like that, you can't totally hear what I'm saying. So I have some exciting, super juicy news to share with you. Now, for those of you that have been following me for a while, you know my signature program is working one-on-one with people for a period of 6 months. I love my liberated, upgraded program. It's the best. And I have been having so many conversations with people talking about the sales process, creating clients, wanting to make more money, that I just got super inspired to create a new offer. And it's going to be a mastermind. It's a small group of 5 people. I'm limiting it to 5 people. And it's going to be really an intimate group where you're really getting lots of hands-on attention. There'll be a weekly call plus a platform where you can talk to me anytime to get this coaching support. And we're going to really dive in specifically around creating clients, creating consistent cash flow, which is ultimately looking at your sales process. So that is going to start the first week of August, and I'm super excited about it. If that interests you, shoot me an email, okay? And my email will be right here in the show notes. Shoot me an email. I want to talk to you about it because, again, if you're doing all the things and still not getting the results that you want at any stage of business, there are some very core fundamental things that you need to address in order to let that cash flow. The way that I'm positioning this is coaches creating consistent cash. And I'm really targeting people that want to be creating at least $5,000 consistently in their business, $5,000 or more consistently in their business. So if you're not really there yet, then this probably isn't the best fit for you. But if you're like, oh yeah, cool, I want to hit that number consistently, or I want to hit just more than that consistently, really dialing in on that ability to create it consistently over time. All right, you guys, as always, that's it for me. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm so glad to have you here with me on the journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you get the notifications for when the podcast drops. And all the information you need to work with me is here in the show notes. Between now and when I see you next, go be extraordinary. Ready to hire your own personal one-to-one mentor and coach to help take you to the next level? Go to my website and sign up for a no-charge, no-pressure consultation where we can get to know each other better. I get to hear about your vision, and I'll help you really nail down exactly what needs to be tweaked in order to catapult you forward in your life and in your business. Go be extraordinary.